like it or not, if you are looking for a job or what have you, you are in sales. The advantage is you're the product and nobody knows that product better than you. The disadvantage is you have to communicate it because there's a lot of other products out there for offer for a prospective buyer, which in this case is a prospective employing agent or employing company. Especially now with the economy having gone what it's gone through over the last 18 months, or what I call the post-Lehman Brothers era, there's a lot of selection out there, so you have to be selling that much more. So my question here, just by show of hands, is how many people here today are here for, and I'll give you two choices, so how many people here are specifically looking for a job? How many people are here to network? I just like doing this. So the question is going to be, you're going to hear, you've heard Jim talk, you're going to hear a lot of interesting people out there. There's going to be people following me. I'm looking forward to the LinkedIn presentation because you can always learn something new. I'll be touching on it as well. LinkedIn is one of those fashionable things that you've got to talk about, right? So, but again, does everybody here, or how many people here by show of hand, whether you were here to look for a job or whether you're here to network, how many here have an action plan that talks to what you're going to do 10 minutes after you leave this room? So, less than 5. How many of you put that plan together in advance of coming here today? Okay, so one of the things that we'll be talking about is plan. What's going to happen to all the cards and information that you're going to collect through the course of the afternoon? How many of you will follow up? Okay, so a couple of more. Let me read you a couple of interesting stats, and whether you like it or not, let's pretend you're all in sales because, again, you are the product and you're selling it. And one day I'll memorize these numbers, but as I get older, I doubt it. But you know that 48% of salespeople never follow up with a prospect. And as the show of hands indicated, over 50% of you are going to leave this event and not do anything about any of the people that you've met. And I don't even want you to think about the people who are prospective hires. There's no reason why some of you, all of you, shouldn't be following up with Jim and leveraging his knowledge of networking further. There's no reason you shouldn't follow up with me. That's why I put my contact info up there, and Tom and so forth. So don't be one of the 48%. Be one of those that's actually going to do something with the information that you gather here today. Some more. 25% of salespeople never make a second call. So again, those of you who have plans, have you included the follow-up plan? Whether you do it the way that Jim did, or whether you do it the way that Tom did, how many are going to be persistent? How many of you have a follow-up plan as to how many times you're going to call somebody? So a subset of the first 5. I hope I don't lose you all with the next question. How many people do you figure of the sales community out there actually make a third call? 3%? 3%? Pretty close. It's about 12%. And only 10% of people make more than 3 contacts. So how many of you here, of the 2 left in the game, because there's only the 2 of you, have a plan for how many times you're going to call them? So what's the maximum time? Let's say Tom had an opening that you wanted to take advantage of. How many times did you call him in the next 2 weeks?
Next 2 weeks?
Yeah.
3 times.
3 times. And then what?
Then I make a decision. Is this really something for me? Or do I follow up in a month, or 2 months, or 6 months? Okay. I always try to close. I will call back in 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, a year maybe.
How many times do you have it in your plan to follow up?
2 weeks, about 2 to 3 times.
2 to 3 times. So I'll give you an example here. 2% of salespeople, 2% of sales are made in the first contact. So if you're only going to follow up once, you're fighting everybody else who's lazy for that 2%. 3% are made on the second contact, 5% are made on the third, 10% are made on the fourth, 80% of sales, and I would argue the same thing goes for jobs, go on the 5th or further call. And again, there's no stalking laws against calling a prospective employer 4, 5, 6, 7 times. All you're doing is showing that individual that you want that job. I recently met with a former CMO, Chief Marketing Officer of a fairly large company. You know them, they're consumer good. And he ran their whole marketing budget, which was in the billions, which is why I like to hang out with him. Yes, ma'am. No, so let's talk about that, because this is something I get, on the sales card. The question was, do we not feel that we're hounding them or bothering them or what have you? So I'll say no, and I'll explain why, and maybe the CMO story will begin to go there. He said by policy, because you can imagine, this is a fairly big company. You'd know them if I mentioned them, and so on. They get calls on a regular basis. Everybody is aware that they have $1 billion budget for marketing, and anything related to marketing doesn't want a piece of that $1 billion. I do, I'm honest about it, which is why, again, I like to hang with the guy, because one day some of that might fall my way. But he was saying that they traditionally ignore the first 2 calls from anybody trying to sell to them, because they just want to see whether this person really wants to do something or whether they're just looking to put a stat on a paper somewhere. So they want to see how many, how persistent people are. Whatever you're doing, sales, what have you, again, blind dates. My wife and I, as a result of a blind date, I was persistent. First few times she turned me down, and I'd given up when most of you will, I would have different kids. So again, the question of persistency, I can't emphasize enough. And think about it from the buyer's point of view. Think about it from the employing person's point of view. How many of you are there, do you suppose, calling that individual for that job? Right? How many other things, because they have their day job as well. I mean, once you go through the filter of HR and so forth, then you get the actual hiring manager or the hiring director. They have a day job. Probably their plan for the day is shot by 9 o'clock because they make the mistake of looking at the emails that came in overnight, the voicemail, the phone calls, and so forth and so on. So if you want to stand out in that din, in that noise of things coming at this individual, you're going to have to be persistent. And think about it. Write down on a piece of paper, think about who it is that you would like to work for, what position, and think about the hiring manager within that company. Think about all the things that they have to do through the course of the day, and in addition to that, they're burdened with having to hire somebody to fill a hole that already exists in their day that they're probably filling. And the example I like to tell people is the people that we're targeting, whether it's for sales or for jobs, probably are trying to pack 16 hours into a 10-hour day. So if you want to stand out in that environment, again, I would argue that you can't stop the person, but that injunction order that everybody's worried about is a lot further down the road than you think. And if you call somebody within a period of 2 weeks, 5 or 6 times, I don't think you're going to even come close to getting arrested. Now, I do want to go back to one thing that Jim said. He refers to it differently, but I think it's a key point, and you have to be cognizant of it, is people have different modes of communication, right? So when I say call, I don't necessarily mean just by phone. Due to my age, I tend to be more phone person because I'm trained that way. But a lot of the business that I'm getting lately is done either through email or even through text, right? And think about it, again, the same person working 16 hours in a 10-hour day. If somebody wanted to get a hold of me today, I probably answered a couple of emails in the back while Jim was talking up here. I probably wouldn't have taken a call. So again, think about the mode of communication, and when it goes to planning and strategy, to echo a theme that Tom said, which we're going to move into in terms of planning, have that planned out. Once I decide to quote-unquote campaign somebody, whether it's for a job or whether in my case it's for a gig, I have a schedule. If I'm going to call somebody on Monday morning and leave a voicemail, what am I going to do on Wednesday? Again, I'm persistent, so if you're a bit easier than me, you won't get arrested for sure because I'll be in line. But if I call somebody on Wednesday morning, I'll leave them another message. Sorry, on Monday morning, I'll leave them another message on Wednesday. If I haven't gotten a response from them by Wednesday evening, I'll send them an email telling them when I'm going to call them. Now, that's an important fact because if you say, George, I'm sorry I missed you after my couple of messages, I'm going to call you Friday morning at 10 o'clock. If you call at 10 o'clock, you look good, because what you've done is subtly demonstrated to the individual that you follow through on what you say. You're able to plan it out, you make that commitment. So if you call within 90 seconds of 10 o'clock, don't be disappointed if they're not there, because you're still scoring points for yourself. Because if you leave a voicemail, George, following through like I promised I would, sorry we missed each other, I'll give you a call early next week. And then you still have a shot, and that's 4 contacts that I've named that individual, right, in that week. I don't think I'm anywhere near an injunction order. So I think, again, if you think about success with people and so forth, as somebody, I think you mentioned it earlier, it's not so much, has anybody here seen the commercial with Michael Jordan? It was out about 5-6 years ago when he's walking into the arena and he talks about all the shots that he missed and all the times that he was given the game ball to shoot in and he missed it, and he talked about how his failures are, and he said that's what makes him a better player. So yeah, I'm not suggesting knock your head against the wall and so forth, but I think if you have a plan and the plan makes sense in the cold light of day, then it really becomes the easy part, which is execution. Because if you don't have a plan, it's easy to doubt yourself.
Keep the messages short, whether phone or email. Keep it short.
What you want to do is get a conversation with the individual. You don't want to sell over the phone. If you get the individual on the phone and a conversation ensues, again, as long as you have your questions ready, as Jim said, and so forth. So again, having that plan is very important. And I'm going to challenge you now for a minute to think about plan in a broader basis. And by the way, if you have questions, just jump in. Go ahead.
So, sorry, if you're going to make a point.
Yeah, put that out there.
Just wanted to know if, let's say, the primary mode of communication was email with an employer, and you decide that you have their phone number, and you call them, does that seem like you're trying to catch them off guard, or does that seem like you're trying to switch to a mode that's a little bit more personable and immediate?
I think it's the latter, that you're showing them that A, you're willing to try different things, so you're able to be versatile. B, that you're willing to experiment. And again, a lot of it, once you make that phone call, is going to come down to the tone. I see a lot of salespeople, nobody in this room, who are really stupid about it because they go, "Oh, I left you a message. I think you didn't call me back, man." Like is that going to get you? And you get this. I mean, 4 messages I left you, man. How come? Shanto told me it's going to be in 4, right? So I think again, once you get them on the phone, instead of thinking, "Oh, gee, I just cheated or I went a different way," just have a clear message. It's having that plan in advance. But try the various things. And again, text is as valid these days as either email or And if you have it in you, man, and it's an old school industry, use fax, right? I mean, if the guy has a fax number on his card. By the way, just as a quick aside, does everybody know how to fish for emails through Google? Because I thought the question you were going to ask me is if you don't have his email. But does anybody know that you can get phone numbers, and it's not 100% foolproof, but it's there if you want to use it. You can get phone numbers, direct numbers, so you don't have to deal with the intermediaries, and emails through Google. And phone numbers, if you know, let's say you're calling the Bank of Montreal. Just there, 416-867 is the exchange, and then all the other extensions, the last 4 digits are individual extensions. So let's say that you were looking for Harvey Brown at Bank of Montreal. He was the hiring person, whereas all the stuff that's in the newspapers or in the job boards are trying to send you through to HR. Subtle messages, talk to HR, but also talk to the hiring manager. You can put in terms of put in Harry Brown, space, open bracket, 416, close bracket, and then space 867. And, again, if you drill through, about 60-70% of the time, you'll find the individual's phone number. And I'll give you an example. The guy that I was after at BMO, who was the VP of Small Business, where I found his phone number, oddly enough, was on the second page of Google because he had participated in a charity event. So it had nothing to do with the bank or whatever, but I got his phone number. Nobody would give it to me in the bank. Next morning, I got him on the phone at 7 o'clock and I had the appointment. Because a lot of these people who are sheltered, and this is again, don't hesitate to call high within the hiring organization. As long as you have something to say, and we'll talk about that in a second. These people don't get a lot of calls. The fact that you call them and get to them directly will give you a leg up on some of the other people who respectfully, but I think to their detriment, follow all the breadcrumbs that are out there that everybody's following. In terms of email, just go to their website and look at their domain and then put the person's first name and last name in, space, @ in their domain, and again, about 60-70% of the time you'll get their email address. So that's one way to mix up the modes of communication. I want to get you in terms of planning, because I think sometimes people look at planning as a very tactical and immediate thing as opposed to a long-term thing. And again, there's big plans, little plans, and then the tactical plans. But I think if you don't have a broader plan, it's going to be more difficult to put the little plans into place. So I'd like you to take a piece of paper and a pen for a second. Those of you who have it, those that don't, do it on the wall. And what I'd like you to do is just think of the period between 2005 and 2010. Conveniently 5 years. And think about the major events that happened in your life, right? Things like you might have gotten married, you might have gotten divorced, maybe both within those 5 years, who knows, right? You might have had, a new job, a new house. Think of all the major things, investments you may have made, new cars that you may have purchased, major vacations, whatever. Think for a couple of minutes, write down the major events that happened in your life.
Yeah. Maybe somebody didn't live that long.
And as you're writing these, and I'll get you to finish this off when the rest of your day, but as you're writing these, ask yourself how many of these were random things that just happened to you, or how many were things that you got involved with and made happen. Just like getting involved with getting a job or getting a sale and making it happen. And I think if you're like most people, I hope, if not, we'll talk afterwards, most of these things you had a hand in actually planning, and there was a direction, there was a reason, and there was a level of proactivity on your part. And it should be the same way here. So that's why I say those of you that came in with a plan as to what you're going to do with the contacts that you make here today, what's the follow-through plans, not just what's going to happen on Wednesday morning, but what's going to happen on February the 15th, what's going to happen on March the 15th, and so forth. If you don't have that, what you're going to do is go from one tactical step to another. If you have the big plan, and again, there's various exercises out there that you can do, but if you have that big plan, then you'll be able to actually go towards the things that you want to do. How many of you here came hoping to find something or with a specific job or type of position in mind? So how many people here are looking for a specific position? Okay. So to that end, how many of you have written down the companies or the organizations that you think you want to work for in that position? And do you have a plan for penetrating those companies? And it is, I don't mind using military terms like penetrate, attack, campaign, because that is what you're doing, right? There's one job out there, there's 6 of you going for it, one gets the job, the other 5 go home hungry, right? So it is, a predatory game, and there's no need to be shy about it. So one of the things that I want you to do is think about the companies that you want to work for. And everybody here has a resume, right?
Yes.
And on your resume it says how great you are, right? How wonderful you are. If you're good looking, you probably got your picture on there, right? And it tells you all the things that you've done in the past, right? So I'm going to get you to rethink your resume and suggest to you that the cardinal rule in sales also applies in looking for jobs, which is what's in it for that. So what you have to do is understand who it is that you're trying to get a job with, and then articulate the value that you're going to bring to that job through them. So instead of talking about all the great things that you've done, which again may or may not be true. I know that my resume is slightly polished, and 90% accurate, but there's some stretching there. So, but all that really has little relevance to the person in the past. It may tell them that you're qualified to do the job, but it really doesn't differentiate you from all the other people who are going for that position. So the thing that I would challenge you to do is think about what are the 3 things that this person is likely trying to achieve in their job as a whole, and what value you can bring specifically to that. So Jim talked about doing research, so if you have target companies in mind, if you have target positions in mind, you probably know what it is that role is about. What value are you going to bring to that position? And not only build it into your resume, but also begin to build it into your campaign. So those people who are going to follow up on the 5 of you who had your hands up about following up after today, what's your plan? So are you going to call them? I'll pick on you.
Well, my role is a little different because I'm a job developer, so I help people get connected with employers.
Okay.
So it depends on the person's profession and how I may connect them with employers. But yes, I definitely will reach out to employers 2 or 3 times a week as well too, to obtain information interviews or appointments on behalf of the clients I'm representing.
Okay. The thing so those of you who are directly looking for a position, the thing I would encourage you to do is think about what value you're going to bring to that person and talk about that. If that's of interest, then they'll look at your qualifications. But believe me, they're getting a lot of resumes that have some great qualifications, but there's a mystery as to whether you really understand what it's about and so forth. So to the question earlier in terms of what to put on your card, I tend to agree with Jim, don't put anything. Convince them what you could do vis-a-vis the conversation. Again, if you want to put a general area that I'm in sales, fine. But again, when I talk about myself, I don't call up VPs of sales and say that I have the greatest, sales training program, this, that, or the other. I try and leverage it or talk about the things that they talk about. So from experience, and again, one of the things you can do through networking is talk to other people. Again, through LinkedIn, look for commonality. And one of the things that I try and look for is people who are like the person I'm trying to get to, so I can talk to them and see what their priorities are and so forth. One of the other things that I do in LinkedIn to sell that you can do for job is, let's say you're trying to get a job, for example, with Cisco. Find people who've had that job in the past and talk to them about how they go about it within that company. Pick up the buzzwords. Look for the language that they speak. In sales, I'll give you an example. Sales managers tend to talk about sales and deals. VPs of sales talk about revenue. It's the same thing, but the language makes a difference. Because as soon as you say sales and deals to a VP, they're going to go, oh, this guy's manager enough. But if you talk about revenue and such, then they're going to think, hey, this guy is speaking like me. So those little things count. But when you reach out to an employer, talk about what's relevant to them. And if you want to find out what that is, just talk to a few of them. So when I call people, I don't talk about sales training. I talk about a fuller pipeline. I talk about more accurate forecasts. And I talk about a shorter sales cycle, which are all outcomes of the work that I do. So instead of talking about the work that you've done, which is great, talk about what you're going to do. How many of you go on a first date and pull out a card and say, here are the 5 ladies I went out with in the last 6 years, what do you think? You don't do that, right? You try and impress them based on unique things that you bring to the table and things that they're going to get out of interacting with you. Now again, it's going to be a little bit different on a date resume than it will be on a job resume. But again, talk to them about what's in it for them as opposed to what it is that you bring to the table. Because let's face it, all of us who went through the course in Seneca got the same diploma, but we all do a different thing with it. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I wrote it down because I do have it here and so forth, is this notion of hanging out with other people like them. So whether you do it on LinkedIn or whether you do it on Twitter and so forth. So one of the things in LinkedIn that I haven't heard anybody touch on is the groups. Is everybody familiar with the groups on LinkedIn?
Yes.
Yeah, so it's a great place to go and listen to what's being talked about. So if you want to pick up what's the buzz in a particular industry or what's the buzz in a particular type of job or what have you, it's a great place to go and learn that. It's a great place also to get involved in discussions. I've had a number of different sales that have started off as people, in a sense, having a discussion within a LinkedIn group, and then all of a sudden that conversation goes offline and so forth. Now, again, you want to do that not only to get a job, but you want to do that to find out what the positions are like and so forth. So again, I can go on, but the thing that I want you to take away is you have to have a plan coming in. So if you don't have a plan now, don't go and beat yourself up. But on your way home or by tonight, put together a plan. I got these many contacts out here. Who else is like these people and so forth. Put a plan together as to what you're going to do with today's event over the next month or so, but then put that in the context of what am I going to do between now and the time that I get the position that I want as opposed to the position that somebody is just willing to offer. Yes, sir.
Also, when you were referring to the resumes, you were saying, I'm not sure, just to clarify, whether you said what you're going to do on your resume or what you're going to do, obviously, in person. And I'm wondering if it would be a faux pas, because generally you want to have a balance, I think, that when you're writing in your job description on your resume, kind of like a results-oriented bullet points of whatever responsibilities you have, do you think it's a good idea to incorporate how the skill you had in that job might apply to the job on your resume as well?
So to your first question, yeah, my comments were about the resume.
Right.
So instead of whether you have a chronological or an expertise-based resume or what have you, people always tend to give rear-view mirror stuff, right? Which is good. I'm not saying it's not necessary in the resume, but if you want to capture that person's imagination, you really have to say what's in it for them. And you have to figure out, and there's some work involved, it's not easy. You have to figure out in advance what is that hiring manager or hiring VP, what are they looking to do? And that's part of the research. Where is the company now? What have they said in public? What are they trying to do vis-a-vis that position and what can contribute to? So I think, yeah, you want to basically say in that resume what you're going to do for them. And I would put in some qualifying stuff as well. So on my resume, which I don't use anymore, but maybe I'll have to one day, I put in there how much return I got. So I managed Canada for Dow Jones for X number of years. This is the overall growth that they realized. I took it from X 100,000 to this many million. That's the type of thing that I wrote. Yes, sir.
Wouldn't what you might do in the future be included in the cover letter rather than the resume?
Yeah, in the resume too, because what they want, they're hiring somebody to move them forward, right? So what I want to do is project like I can be that engine or that horse that'll move you forward. So again, if depending on the nature of the job, look, if you're getting a job that's moving the box from here to there, it's limited. But I'm assuming most of you are not looking for sort of menial labor type things. So I think again, think about what would be important to that hiring manager. That's going to take work. It's not like there's no website that's going to say these are the 3 things. You have to talk to people, you have to get experience. That's one of the benefits of these networking events. I sometimes go to networking events just strictly to find out what the buzzwords are, what the issues are. Because again, if sometimes I go to these things where they have to have events for CFOs, chief financial officers. The topics that are in the conference are generally the things that are top of mind for CFOs that year. So I try and drill down on those topics if I'm selling to a CFO. So to your question, I would look at what the current focus is for whatever position that you're looking for, and talk in terms of here's what I bring and here's the type of things that we could do. So Jim was saying about in terms of asking questions of the employers and all that. One of the things that you could do when you're with a prospective hiring person is ask them, if we were sitting here 12 months from now and you were saying that the hire was a success, why would that be? So before you ever start talking about what you bring to the table, when I'm meeting with a VP of sales, I say, if we sat here 24 months from now and you were telling me that the team had hit a grand slam, what would that look like? And all of a sudden they tell me what nirvana looks like, right? And in a nasty way I go, okay, why aren't we there now? I'm not suggesting you do that doing an interview. But when they tell me why they're not there now, I know all the things that I could sell them. But it's no different when you're going for a job. If you ask him, 12 months from now, you told me the hire was great, what would that be? And he tells me it's this, 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 and this. I'm going to highlight those aspects of my resume and experience that are going to help him to achieve this, 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 and this. So I would echo, in fact, that you should start with a question. There's nothing wrong with you asking the question of the person interviewing you and set the table that way. He's still going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, but if you want to stand out from the rest of the available inventory that's out there, one way to do it is to turn the table on them in a polite and professional way. And the way to do that in a polite and professional way is to do your research up front. Any questions? Any answers? Always questions. So, again, I'll put